Vogue, and so the French Vogue had to send a group of journalists and a photographer to India to do this job for Indira Gandhi, this public relations job. And I immediately lifted my hand and said, "Look, I know India, please send me." And they sent me. And it was a strange trip because I had lived in India for 2 years, you know, traveling in third class and making ends meet. And there they would put me on a plane every morning at 5 to go to a different city. And in a different city, there would be like 30 limousines with officials picking me up to take me around the factories and the glorious places, which I didn't want to see. And so I spent most of my time fighting with those officials to be able to get away from that public relations trip. And I managed to get a few decent photographs.
What I really like about this series is that there are some beautiful pictures. There's wonderful work in color. There's this a nice sense of place. Especially I like this double spread. So it gave you a chance to get back to India and do some kind of reportage in the middle of
Yes, and living in the Taj Mahal Hotel with all those plane trips and limousines. It was pretty hard. And I had dinner with Indira and her son. And her son was a very nice person, and her daughter-in-law.
This is the end of that sequence, I believe. Oh no, it ends here. One of the things that I wanted to include in the sequence was you did a lot of traveling. This is for Harper's Bazaar in Indonesia. How often did you work in color, and did you feel strongly about color in black and white? Was there?
I'm happy that you asked this question. Well, in the beginning, photography was black and white, to a person of my generation. And then from time to time, a magazine had color pages. And that was considered difficult, to the point that fashion magazines paid twice as much per page for color than for black and white. And so I would do color.
Paid the photographer?
Paid the photographer.
Okay, that's nice.
And so I would do color when I was asked. And the trick was, you know, to get some very vivid colors, so to make it look, you know, this is special. And honestly, I don't think most of these color photographs I took at that time were all that interesting. I mean, my main worry, I started worrying then already much more about taking color away than about adding color. And when I managed to take enough color away, like in the photograph you saw before, it became interesting, you know, of the fishing nets.
When you say taking color away,
the one before.
The one,
this
one.
Well, there wasn't much color. I mean,
so
to avoid color. To avoid color. So really, you know, the best one could do to make a good photograph was to avoid color. And then a few years later, between 82 and 86, I decided I would make a major essay about New York. And obviously that had to be in color because the color is so strong. And there, for the first time, I learned how not to work against color, but to work with color. I mean, I learned there's still much to learn. But that to me was extremely interesting, to work with color in a positive way, which other photographers had done much better before me. Saul Leiter, whom you mentioned, has done it.
But that was outside of fashion.
But that was outside of fashion, yes.
I particularly like the color in this. It's very vivid and it's very fashion in some ways. And also this is there's a nice sensuality in the models, but mostly you're focusing on pattern and color.
You know what? It's the first time I see these photographs.
Really?
After 30 years, I've never seen them because I lost the transparency were never given back to me by Bazaar, and I don't have that particular issue of Bazaar, so I've forgotten them completely.
Yeah, what do you think about them now?
I must think about it.
Let's see. Let me go back. I like this one with the two children, especially.
The one with the two children is okay. I wouldn't put them in my iPad app. These, and you know what? Harper's Bazaar were not happy with them. They published them because they had spent so much money on their trip.
Oh.
And they were not happy. And the worst
They weren't
part,
happy. I mean, with
no,
these like
no.
vivid...
One of the girls was my wife at the time.
One of the models.
Yeah.
Which one?
Well,
Let's see.
you see her face in one. No, not her.
At the very beginning.
This one, yes.
She was your wife.
Yeah. And
well, I mean, one of the things I like about so many of your fashion pictures is this sense of warmth, as I said before, but also affection and almost adoration. Her look at you at the camera is so beautiful.
I know, we were very much in love. She was a terrible bitch, and we had a terrible fight after that.
How long did the marriage last?
Not too long.
So did you travel to Indonesia with her?
Yes.
Well, maybe we should move on from that.
We better, yes.
This is another picture, a series in color that I like your
nice
work
one.
with
This
children.
Is a nice one, yes.
And this one in particular, I love this, the girl looking into the mirror.
Yeah. No, this is a nice one. I would like to have her lost it. And this is a nice one.
So there's the sense of you going while you were working for French Vogue or American Harper's Bazaar or wherever you were. It seems like you were quite a lot on the road. Was this your decision, or you're hoping to be able to do that?
No, I was happy when they sent me on the trip, of course. And when I was able to see a little of those countries, sure. And I did have the belief and the impression then that traveling was a way of knowing the world, of understanding the world. And now that I'm too old to travel, I mean, coming to Vancouver has been quite an adventure to me. I'm finding a lot of adventure and a lot of discoveries of the world just wherever I am, very close to me, in some detail or something that I see anywhere. And really, this is what's so marvelous. But that's what's so marvelous also with digital photography. That now with this small compact camera, everything is open to you. You photograph this microphone. You photograph your own fingers. You photograph anything that's inside. And you make. I mean, I feel I'm making more interesting discoveries now than going to Indonesia or wherever.
Wow. Let's see. This I included this in the show for obvious reasons, but I love this sequence. This is a little dark, I'm afraid, but it's a series that is mainly shown in the vitrine at the show of children. Where was this again?
That was in Canada, in Baffin Island.
Baffin Island.
Yes.
And what was the circumstance of
Well, it was the same editor who organized the trip to Indonesia, and it was before Indonesia.
Also at Harper's Bazaar.
She was a very good editor. She was an editor for children's fashion. And what they would do at the time, which again sounds incredible now, is to make a whole issue, or I don't know how many pages, about furs for children. I mean, who would make and buy furs for children nowadays? They did. And so where can you photograph furs for children? Well, of course, on Eskimo children. So we take a plane to Baffin Island and photograph them on Eskimo children. So we went to the place and we went to the local school, and I said, which are your worst kids? Could we have those? And so we got the worst kids.
But why?
Well, they would be more fun, I thought.
They would be more lively.
Yes. And so We put those American furs on them and photographed them. And then it started getting really cold, and I couldn't touch my camera anymore.
Oh.
And the poor kids were freezing. And they didn't, they couldn't stand it for very long.
Oh.
So we took them to the ice cream shop, because the great reward was ice cream on Baffin Island.
They seem to be having a good time here.
They had a good time. They were okay.
This is the whole sequence. It reminds me actually of Diane Arbus's pictures of children, because she did a lot of children's wear for Bazaar early
Did
on.
she? I had never seen that.
Yeah, well, she also she did her own children, as well as other children. And she once did 2 issues of the New York Times supplement for children's fashion. It was one of her early fashion and rare fashion things. But these remind me of those in a way. They were very much about unusual children.
The editor for children's fashion at Bazaar at the time was Deborah Turbeville, who became a photographer. And her assistant, I don't remember her name, but was this girl who then became the children's editor, who was a very clever girl and who had these great ideas, like traveling to Baffin Island or to Bali.
Well, I love this sequence. I think the children have real personality. They're not typical child models, clearly.
Well, they were not doing it for the camera, which was, and we'll come back to what we were showing before, which was what I disliked, were the models doing things for the camera. So at that time, I started deciding that I would cut the models' heads off in the photograph.
So to
not
all
to
that.
show her look for the camera. And the editors of Bazaar liked that very much.
Oh.
Not, simply because they didn't like the models anyhow.
Well, it focused completely on the
and
clothes.
focused on clothes, so they liked it, and they accepted it. And years later, when I had my first exhibition about fashion photography, that was in Paris, and that was in 1989, which was the second anniversary of the French Revolution. I had the idea of telling some journalists, you see, I was a Robespierre of fashion photography, because I cut all the heads off. And so that cut all over the heads.
I'm sure that was a popular quote.
This was very popular, yes.
This is back to more sort of traditional fashion in a way. This is from French Vogue in 1972. This picture on the left of the woman in the wet pants is in the show, and it's one of my favorite images of yours. It feels, again, like reportage, like you just happen to find these women walking down the street, although they're incredibly well dressed. This is part of this same sequence. And also what interested me when I found these in the magazine was to see them interspersed with work by Helmut Newton and Guy Bourdin, who were kind of the stars of French Vogue at that time, and to see your work alongside theirs made your work really stand out.
Well, that was, as I told you on another occasion, this was my main ambition. You see, we were 3 stars at French Vogue, Helmut Newton, Bourdin, and myself. And I would say I was a minor star among the 3. And my great ambition was to show that all the ideas and all the eccentricities were really not so necessary. And you could do just as well without. And I mean, the maximum would have been for me to make both Helmut Newton and Bourdin a little bit ridiculous. And I think with those photographs, it worked.
It did. Well, it was especially interesting to see them all together, because it was page after page after page.
Yeah.
And of course, the Helmut Newton and Guy Bourdin work, the women really looked like mannequins. They were used like mannequins. And here they look like real women going about their lives.
I must say, Helmut Newton was a great friend, and I had the greatest admiration for him. So there was no personal antagonism at all.
And Guy Bourdin?
Look, Guy Bourdin, we never really got together.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, I cannot say anything against him. I admire his work. But for me, there were two kinds of photographers who worked in fashion, and these were photographers who did fashion only, and photographers who also photographed something else. And with the ones who did fashion only, I felt we had much in common, and we became friends, and we were like brothers or cousins or whatever, or friends at least. While Bourdin belonged more to the category of people who were doing only fashion. And that was another race. And so there was not much contact.
This opens up the question for me of what other fashion photographers who you were working alongside at the same period that you admired or were interested in, or...
Well, I mean, Louis Farah was a friend.
Louis Farah.
So Leiter was a friend. For Evden, I had a great admiration, and we had a friendly relationship, a distant relationship. Penn, I only spent one afternoon with him, but it was one of the greatest moments of my life.
Oh, why? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I was interviewing other photographers to make a book about photography.
Oh.
And he accepted to meet me, but didn't want me to use his interview with others.
Oh, I'm not surprised. He seemed very reticent about talking.
He didn't want to be in anything where other photographers were. And Evden refused for another reason, that is, he was making a book about himself and didn't want to give away material from his own book, and, which was very much like Evden too. But so there were actually not too many other fashion photographers. Jean Lucieff, of course, was a great friend. But there were not too many who were of that sort, who were interested in other things, in other subjects than fashion.
Well, I'm also curious to sort of go back historically, when you first started working in fashion, were you interested in the historical figures, Horst or Hune or Beaton? Did any of them interest you at all in terms of the history?
No, because I was reacting against them, but mainly because I didn't know about them. About Hune I found out much later. Horst I knew about and didn't care much for. And I mean, everything that was just fashion I wasn't interested in. Hune I admired a lot later when I knew. And someone about whom I learned much later, who also kind of belonged to my family, was Munkachi.
Yes.
I met him actually personally, but just between two doors at Harper's Bazaar.
Yeah, because Munkachi was working at the same time you were at Harper's Bazaar.
No, a few years before.
You stopped?
Yes.
Because it seems like there was... He
No,
worked for quite a long time.
It was a few years before. And I only much later learned about Munkachi. And I have an immense admiration for him.
Well, in fact, because Munkachi came from reportage, came from a whole history of kind of avant-garde work before he started working in fashion, and then he really did revolutionize it in a certain way by putting, sort of sports, very sporty images into fashion.
Well, for Munkachi, fashion was just one of the many things that were around to be photographed. And so he photographed fashion as he would have photographed many other things.
Right.
And, this was the same thing I did. I didn't imitate him. I didn't even know of him. But I mean, it was the same.
But in a sense,
the
you
same
came
direction,
from the same place. This is the last of that particular pret-a-porter series. And then this, I never asked you about this. This is a sequence, a very long sequence, that appeared in French Vogue, that was a collaboration between you and Alain René?
It was a kind of collaboration.
The film director, Alain René, this was an issue that there were at least 60 or 70 pages.
Yes, it was a complete... French Vogue was a very generous magazine. For one reason, French Vogue didn't need a readership. They couldn't care less if it was sold to 30,000 or 50,000.
They didn't feel indebted to their
It didn't matter at all. What mattered was that they were determining the status of the advertisers. So they they were that thick with that many advertisements, and Vogue was read by the people who advertised in Vogue. So the public didn't matter really. So their editorial work, they really did what they wanted. They didn't have any regard for the public or anything. They did what they liked, which was really what made the magazine could make the magazine extremely interesting.
Yeah.
And at Christmas they would make special issues, and I got kind of specialized in those special issues. The first had been about Hitchcock, and then there was one about Peter Ustinov, and then there was one about René, who was a sort of avant-garde French movie director. And
who at that point had made last year Marienbad,
yes,
Hiroshima Mon Amour, and so his involvement with this, I'm assuming, is choosing these projected backdrops.
Well, more than that. He had made a book of photographs which he called the repérage, which were places that he had photographed thinking of his films.
Oh.
So we tried to find a way to connect, and of course the job was to connect Hitchcock or René or whatever with fashion. I mean, at the same time, the magazine had to show certain dresses, certain perfumes, whatever the advertisers were, because this was what the whole operation was for. So it was, after all, it was publicity. Except you had to work in the, be it René or Hitchcock or whatever, into the publicity system. So that's where I had to be clever. And so sometimes I succeeded to be. And so in that case, I agreed with René that he would allow me to use the photographs he had taken for his repérage.
So all of these backdrops are his own?
His photographs. These photographs are half his and half mine, to be honest. Except I had to find a way, and this was very difficult, to project them and to be able to see the girl in front and the projection at the same time, which was technically terribly complicated. Nowadays I would do this with Photoshop in 5 minutes.
But there is something more effective about the idea of this sort of stage set that you're creating with her standing in front.
Well, it was a kind of pre-Photoshop. It was a kind of doing what now everyone is doing with Photoshop.
Right. Well, in which you wouldn't, the model and the image would not be even in the same place.
Exactly.
Necessarily.
Yes.
So this does have the sense of the model being standing in front of a screen.
Yeah.
And so it does really have, ties in more to the idea of film.
So I invented Photoshopping.
Thank you. But I'm showing quite a lot of these because I think this is a great series. It goes on, and it was really an extensive series that included some sort of more studio images, but I've chosen mostly the rear projections. This is a very beautiful one with this.
Yeah, well, there's no Photoshopping.
Right. This is included in the show as a photograph as well. Oh, I was afraid someone would ask.
75, I think, or so, something like that, or maybe 76.
Yeah,
77.
I can tell you.
No, I can tell you, 77.
Okay.
I can tell you 77.
78, according to this.
78, right? Okay.
So, and then this sort of, the layout was pretty fantastic. This becomes like a series of, like a filmic.
That was the layout people who did that. Well, and of course there was a reason for meaning, because after all, René is a filmmaker, so they tried to give a feeling of cinema.
Right. This is a very different sequence. This is another issue. This is
Harper Bazaar,
Harper's Bazaar.
67.
This is a very long sequence. I've only included a few images, but it's one of the few studio sequences, and I was curious about your work in the studio and whether you were happy to sort of have that as an alternative.
That was a time when I decided that photographing situations in the streets was too easy. And it would be more difficult and more raffiné to make something happen, something unique which couldn't happen twice, to make it happen in front of a white background.
Raffiné, I'm not sure, I don't understand I'm sorry, I should know French better, but I can't.
Sophisticated, say sophisticated.
Okay. But I think, in fact, that this is very sophisticated. There's something really nice about the models. The layout was very effective, and you have a range of interesting models.
The problem I had in those years, I remember that, and that was interesting. What I really disliked was the layout of the magazine, the systematic way Harper's Bazaar had. You had one large photograph on one page and then a small photograph on the page in front. And I thought, well, this bores me. And so I was trying to make photographs that they would have to put on double page spread. And